We'll reconvene. I'm sorry. It's 10. It's 10. Now it's 10:12. Okay. Oh my goodness. I guess I need more sleep. I was looking at the list and I'm like 6. We already did that. Now we're on 7. All right. Let's try that again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 10:12 and the board is now reconvened in open session. We'll first consider action on our closed session items. And we just lost one trustee, so we'll go slowly with Mrs. Tossan. Would you like to go first?
Thank you, Madam President. I move to appoint Mark Muscarello to the position of Middle School Assistant Principal and to approve him as a Professional Development and Appraisal System Appraiser for 2015-16.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tossan and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. The motion passes. Mr. Burdine?
Yes, Madam President. I move that the Board of Trustees accept the hearing officer's recommendation concerning the Level 3 employee grievance appeal of Patricia Vargas.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
I move.
Wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion passes.
Sorry, excuse me.
Mr. Burdine has another one.
Sorry, Madam President. Yes, I move that the board approve the proposed settlement agreement between USOR Site, PRP Group, and Fort Bend Independent School District for the USOR Site and authorize the superintendent or his designee to execute the agreement.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Ms. Hellinger?
Yes, I move to appoint Tatanisha Parker to the position of High School Assistant Principal and to approve her as a Professional Development Appraisal System Appraiser for 2015-2016.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hellinger and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Ms. Hellinger?
Yes, I move that the board approve a 1-year contract extension of the superintendent's contract, extending the contract to April 30th, 2019.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hellinger and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. I believe that concludes our closed section action items. Right. So now we'll move on to the board members' reports. Mrs. Tossan, can you please give the activity report?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We had 3 board members that attended the trip to Foshan, China this month. Mr. Burdine, Ms. Hellinger, and Mr. George. So thank you guys for doing that for us. We attended the board E-Team Strategic Planning Workshop. We had members attend Acting U.S. Secretary of Education John King's visit to Sharpstown High School and HISD. We had board members visit Krista McAuliffe Middle School, Ridge Point Elementary School, and Briargate Elementary School. We had board members attend Elkins High School Math Honor Society, the Fort Bend ISD Leadership Judicial Session, the Texas Public Policy Foundation Policy Orientation, the Houston Galveston Area Council Board meetings, basketball games at Baines Middle School, and swim meets at Ridge Point High School.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. Now, do we have any special reports tonight? Ms. Hellinger?
Yes, thank you. President James and fellow board members, it is our pleasure that on January 1st through January 10th, Jason Burdine, KP George, and myself accompanied Dr. Dupree and Mr. Allison Nguyen on our recent trip to Taipei, Taiwan, and Foshan, China. We would like to thank Mrs. Sophie Chow from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office and Mr. Allison Nguyen with the Fort Bend Global Initiative Program for the opportunity to experience education and culture systems abroad. A special thanks to Mrs. Julie Dupleshin from our Communications Department for arranging our travel. From the moment we arrived to the day we left, our days were filled with nonstop activities. We were able to visit and experience 9 different schools and one university, and visit with the Ministry of Education with both providences. We were also afforded the opportunity to be immersed in the local culture and heritage and foods. Some of our highlights from the trip are, and I just named a few. We found that there was an overwhelmingly pleasantry in the culture and the disposition of their youth. Extracurricular and club activities were conducted as part of the school day. In some schools, children are required to participate in 2 sports and at least 1 art. This cultivates the student in which everyone has the opportunity to develop or nurture a talent. School days are a bit longer than ours, which included more recess time and even a lunch-nap combination period in some schools. Students participated in various academic competitions on a monthly basis. This helps to strengthen their skills and develop their spirit of competition. Discipline is not a major issue as they have a very engaged parent population, so much so that the head of their PTA has an office at the school to be the liaison with the parents. Schools that have a great number of economically disadvantaged students tend to do poorly in their testing. They also have to provide additional resources to help support the needs of the children in order to increase the opportunity of success for that child, just like we do here in the U.S. And then, interestingly enough, majority of the schools had dormitories. But finally, kids are kids no matter where they are. Some don't like doing math. Some are scholars. Not everyone gets 100. Frankly, some weren't paying attention. However, the commitment to success for all their students is paramount in the methodologies and commitment to their student success. This has been a great opportunity, and we look forward to increasing the partnership that we have with those entities in order to further equip our children with opportunities so that they can aspire to do more than they can imagine. Jason, KP, myself. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's a very nice report.
Can I just, Madam President?
Yes.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate hearing what you found, and it's quite interesting. I wouldn't expect some of that, so thank you.
It's hard to follow that up. She really said it all. And once again, that was just a tidbit of all that we learned and experienced. So I can't thank everyone enough for making that possible. There was a lot of folks that made that a reality for us. And I mean, there was, people in the background, and I know Dr. Whitback went last year, and she was a big help in just making it happen. And thank you for that. And it was a life-changing event, I think, for all of us. So not only did we learn a lot and figure out what they did well, but we were able to take that knowledge and, improve our kids or figure out what we don't do well. So thank you again.
Thank you both very much for that report. Mrs. Tossan, do you have a report as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So I attended the Texas Public Policy Foundation policy orientation on January 6th, 7th, and 8th in Austin. And there were a couple of sessions that I attended. There were several things that were discussed, but a couple of sessions that I attended that I thought the board might be interested in hearing about. One was on school finance, and the other one was on school choice. Given the hour, I'm going to be brief. But with respect to school finance, there was discussion in the session that I attended by Senator Huffines. He basically presented to us 3 potential solutions to the finance issue that the state faces, and as we all know, that case is now pending before the Texas Supreme Court, and we will hopefully get a decision from them in March, is what we're thinking at this point. But Senator Huffines outlined 3 potential solutions. One was to change the Texas Constitution. He basically said that we vote on the budget, and so we are accountable. And his theory was that since the legislature sets the budget, they decide what schools and districts get to spend, and the buck stops with them. His second proposal was changing the taxing system. Basing the education funding on the property tax system is not working, and so he didn't say exactly what that would be, but the Texas Public Policy Foundation did present a proposal, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, and Senator Huffines supported that. The third one was implementing school choice through education savings accounts, which is basically the school choice issue I'll talk about in a minute. It wasn't clear to me how this was a solution to the current funding issues, but his rationale was that this is an opportunity to press the reset button and on education, and basically restructuring what he called the whole thing, I guess the whole system. The Texas Public Policy Foundation, through Michael Barbara, proposed a solution to the school finance issue that the legislature will be facing in the next session. They basically think the current property tax system should be abolished, and that the state should revert back to the per capita system, which was originally implemented under the Constitution. The basis is that the Constitution preserves the liberties and rights of the people and not the districts or any one entity. It provides for funding by student, with more funding being awarded for students who require more financially intensive education, special education students, English language learners, that type of thing. The focus, they said, was on equity for all students instead of equity for all districts. I did ask Michael for a copy of their proposal, and he agreed to send it along, so I can share that with the board and with administration when we get it. And he was definitely interested in our thoughts and what our perspectives were, so I found that to be very positive. And Senator Huffines also invited us to come and provide feedback as well, so I thought that was a very positive interaction. And I thought Mr. Barba's proposal sounded interesting and maybe a positive step in the right direction, but we would, I would be interested in hearing from our school finance community what they thought about it when it finally comes out. In the area of school choice, the TPPF brought in a Nevada law that was just recently passed in their last session. Senator Scott Hammond, who's the author of the law, and Lieutenant Governor Mark Hutchison from Nevada came and talked about it. They recently passed the law instituting the Education Savings Plan accounts, or the ESAs as they call them. It's not yet fully implemented, so there's no data, but they're hoping to implement this next year, and we should be getting some data back from them. Basically, it allows for up to $5,100 per student out of what they estimated to be about $5,700 per student that is in total cost. For the state, that's, I guess, the state average, I would assume. They were a little vague on that, but it allows for up to $5,100 per student on an application process, or $5,700 per student if the student has disabilities or is low income. It can be applied for by qualifying school-age children, and to qualify, you have to be in public school for at least 100 consecutive days and apply to the treasurer for creation of the ESA. The money applies to educational opportunities, including school, tutors, YMCA for PE credits, that type of thing, transportation. And they give a list of educational opportunities. Texas's response by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Senator Larry Taylor, and former U.S. Senator Phil Gramm was that they were very favorable to this option that Nevada had passed for ESAs. They claim that the money will not be taken from public schools, although they didn't give a really thorough explanation of how that would work. They expressed a desire to create competition in the marketplace for educational services. There were arguments made for low-income families, families whose children attend failing schools, families who have kids with disabilities and need more options, and that type of thing, in support of the ESA program. TPPF board member Stacy Hawk made a pretty compelling argument to open up educational opportunities for all children, as she said. She will be working on that legislative policy and has agreed to turn over her work and her proposal once completed, which she said would be very soon. I spoke with her. She was very open to getting feedback from us as trustees as well, and the administration. I did express some concerns that we have discussed here in this boardroom. One is it really opportunity for all? When particularly children with disabilities don't have school choice options that are inclusive. And that really wasn't something they had considered, because the focus was on providing educational opportunities for students with disabilities that were segregated, so they hadn't really considered that. We need to be sure that all really means all. Adequate funding, is $5,100 really enough for low-income families to pay for private school, which averages $8,100 a year? And I pointed out a flaw in the competition argument, which we've discussed. Is it true competition when the playing field's not leveled? When private schools have different standards or accountability than public schools? And then we also discussed addressing problems within the current system, like accountability, TEKS, pre-K, special ed compliance, differentiated instruction, and those types of things. Overall, everyone was very receptive and open to hearing our concerns and discussing those and trying to come up with solutions that were that took those into account and addressed them. So it was overall positive experience. I think it was really good for us to hear some of the things that the legislators are thinking about as they approach this next session. And I appreciated the opportunity to go. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan, for going, and I think you told me that you were one of the only trustees there. So that was a nice add to their conference, that you could give that perspective.
Yeah, there was only one other trustee from the entire state of Texas that came to 2 of the sessions, and it wasn't those 2 sessions necessarily. So, yeah, I think it was important for somebody to be there and represent public education. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rice, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to thank Mrs. Tossan and Mr. Burdine and Ms. Haliger and Mr. George for representing our school district and for advocating on behalf of public education. We have to get off the dais and out in the community and engage in conversation to do that. I know it takes time. I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right, I believe that ends our special reports. So we're ready now to go on to the consent agenda. Are there items that we'd like to remove from the consent agenda? Mr. Rosenthal.
Madam President, I would like to remove 11B, 11H3,
All right. Is there anything else? I'd entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of items 11D and 11H3 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tossan. Do we have discussion? Any questions on any of these items? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. I just want to say it's really intimidating to see these pictures up here on the screen. It's nice, but wow, there I am again. Okay, sorry, that was a distraction. All right, now we'll be on, let's look at the, anybody else distracted? Let's go to the items from the consent agenda. Can we get a motion for them?
motion to approve consent agenda item 11B.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rosenthal and a second by Mr. Rice for item 11B, which is the 2016-17 district calendar. Do we have comments or questions from any of the trustees?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
So the reason I I wanted to pull this is I wanted to just see if we had any other final discussion on it. We have received some communication. And then I think something that we saw this morning or this afternoon about maybe some changes that, maybe weren't fully understood because it seemed like the TEA never really defined it until like extremely recently as far as the waivers of minutes and whatnot. And I think it's important that we just make sure we understand that before we, pull the trigger on this and decide whether or not we want to, kick this back to the committee for another hour of discussion and have it come back, or, I just want to make sure that, we completely understand this.
I'd be glad to clarify a few things with you. We have had some feedback in the last couple of days. Not a lot when you consider the amount of constituents that we have in our community, but a few certainly. And I wanted to just share with the board that from the beginning of the time in which we began this process, there's been uncertainty with regard to waivers. And I think that all of my colleagues that I've spoken to in the nearby districts would agree with that. And I found a piece of an FAQ, and I'd like to read you two sentences to the FAQ that the House Bill 26 that they published for us. And it says, do you have a time frame for the decision to be made concerning the waivers for the 2016-17 school year? And the answer is, there has not been a final decision on whether or not staff development waiver days should still be included in district calendars. We believe the intent of House Bill 2610 was to relieve the need for waiver days. However, discussion is still taking place with regard to certain waiver days. So when we began the process with the calendar committee, we pretty much knew we couldn't rely on the fact that we would have waivers that would offset. We, as you know, because it's on your agenda item, are planning that to be as there as a backup. But we knew we couldn't rely on it. So our calendar was designed so that it wasn't dependent on those waivers, if that makes sense. And
Chris, would you mind just explaining what the waiver means?
yes, I'm going to see if I can show you I made a new slide that I thought might help, and I added it to the presentation from last week. So perhaps this will help us. But if you look on the left-hand side in the current calendar that we have now, and it says without waivers. So here we are with 175 days at 420 minutes per day, and there's our total with 73,500. You've seen that in your memos, how we were behind. If we were to do everything exactly as we did it with no waivers, we would be 2,100 minutes short. Okay, and you've seen that before. If we were to take the current calendar and we were to add with waivers, you can see that we would add in 1680 because that's 4 PD days that we have now for professional development. We currently have 4. And we would want to back out 840 minutes. The state says 420 per day, even though we might have a day that's longer. The most you can count is 420. We want to be able to include those bad weather makeup days. Everyone was pretty consistent about that across the board. So if we did that, we'd have 74,340 and we'd be 1,200 minutes short. 1260 actually, and that's with waivers.
Hey, can you stop right there just for a second? So the professional development days count as instructional minutes?
If you receive a waiver, just like now, it's easier to think of it in days, but if right now you have 180 days and you have 5 waivers, then those are no count. It's as if you're kind of given a grace. And so with the minutes, it's 420 minutes of grace, so to speak. The same type of concept that we're using in today's terms with days.
So if just to clarify, so it makes it seem like if we did nothing, just kept the current schedule, we would basically be given credit for 75,180 minutes. I think that's what that says.
Without adding any bad weather makeup.
Right, just the way it is today.
Correct.
So if as it stands right now, we would have, because they're giving you credit for those professional development days, even though kids aren't there, they're giving you credit for 75,180 minutes. Okay, and then if you needed the 2 makeup days, you're down to 75. Man, I gotta get my eyes redone.
And we need
75,340.
75.6.
Right.
That's the magic number. So when we look over to the top right and we look at the way in which we proceeded, thinking of it in terms of without waivers. In other words, if the state is saying to us, we suggest that you create a calendar with no waiver days and maybe one with waiver days, they're wanting, the feeling that you get, and I will actually say in my personal conversations with TEA on 2 different accounts, seem to be wanting to get out of the waiver business. Okay, that was the term was given to me. So we proceeded through the process, we wanted to propose a calendar that didn't depend upon the waivers. So, and then we had other factors as well. So now you see what we're bringing forward to you, 176 days with an increase of 20 minutes, which is 440. And that equals the 77,440 minutes. And that's been in all of your memos, that number. We want to take back out 2 days of bad weather so that we don't have to make those up. And we end up with 76,600, and we are 1,000 minutes over. In other words, we could cover a third bad weather makeup day, or we could just end up with 1,000 minutes that our children get throughout the year that's additional. That's without waivers. When you add waivers at the bottom right in, then you end up being, if the state were continuing on, and they are now saying they will grant all of our waivers. So for this year. But for the following year, it's completely not, it's unknown. So the balance is, do you go ahead and do what, is maybe imminent for the following year? Or do we look at some other data when we make that final recommendation?
Can I just clarify, when you say this year, you actually mean 2016-17,
Correct.
not the 15-16, right?
Yes, for the
Right.
following year, the
Right.
proposal in front of you, they will grant those waivers. That's what we're being told as of today. So what I wanted to share with you, when we looked at all of those things, and you go back to another really piece of data, because the committee talked a lot about instruction as well. And this piece, these few slides here were very compelling in our comparison in the Region 4 area. So when we talk about how many minutes a day our children are receiving now in Fort Bend ISD, our elementary kids are receiving 420, and the average in the region is 435. You can see how it's broken down. And then you go to middle school, the average in the region is 438, so we're 18 minutes behind the average. And I want to preface that this is before districts are considering adding any minutes. And because I have been in contact with several colleagues, I'll share a few of those with you in a moment. And then high school, 18 minutes less than the average. So it wasn't just a matter of looking at the waivers. That was a piece, but knowing also what is the better package to bring the board in terms of the instructional programming, because it balances out holidays, it balances out the flow of the calendar year to our families, as well as the instructional minutes. So in looking at some of the other districts, it's interesting because I think it has to go back to the ambiguity that we had from TEA from the beginning. Because as I look at Alvin ISD, Lamar Consolidated ISD, Katy ISD, Spring Branch ISD, and Houston ISD, all of those districts are proposing calendars. I don't know where they are in the process. I know Katy's was approved tonight, between a range of 1,300 minutes over to 2,275 minutes over. So that's if all waivers were given, because they're looking at sometimes some of them have a few more days than we do. Some of them have up to 445 or 450 minutes for children. So this proposal is in line with our peers in the region. It is definitely. Now, if the board wants us to go back and consider, reducing the minutes so that our students are not having additional minutes, we certainly can reconvene the committee and do that, or proceed in any way that the board would choose.
Ms. Sellinger has a question, comment.
All right, I just wanted to follow up then based on what you stated. So you said Katy is approving with 135 minutes without, correct?
Katy's calendar is approving with 179 days. Their minutes vary from elementary and secondary, but based on my calculations, they're 1,370 minutes over if they were to apply for waivers as well.
Okay, but 135 without the waivers, right? 135 minutes, 135 minutes?
No, not minutes. No, they're between 430 and 425 minutes at their levels. They're similar to us. We're proposing 440, and we're at 420 now. what I said was they're 1,300 minutes over what the minimum requirement is that TEA is asking. And that's what you see commonly in these districts that are near us.
Without the waivers. Which was your chart on the upper right.
Without the waivers, just like what I've showed us for
1,000.
ourselves, yes.
And then they have 179 days where we're proposing 176.
6. And here's the other one I wanted to show you, which is a perfect segue. This is how we compare to the other districts in Region 4 in terms of the number of days. So if we add and recommend the 176, you can see, the most common number there is 177. And that's this year's calendar for everyone. That's not what's being proposed. That's where they are now. And we sit at the 175. So we're lower in terms of the amount of days than most of our peers as well. So those were all factors that the committee talked through. But the actual, decision about whether you go ahead and propose to have more minutes now, to have that be a part of the package, that's our recommendation. That we think it's a sound proposal, that the minutes can be used wisely and other groups of stakeholders can pull together and develop that plan in more detail. But you do have some leeway you can pull back. If you chose to say, we want 5 minutes less, we only want 15 more, or something like that. Certainly there is some cushion there that we can play with.
So if we go from 20 to 15, what is the difference in minutes? I mean, do we still have enough to meet the state requirements?
Yes.
So, because I think I read something where you said that 20 was, we just went for a round number, and because of the
Yes.
charts which were, like you said, were compelling, that showed we were below anyway in
Yes.
minutes and days.
And all of those things, you are correct. There was a lot of other reason to go for the 20. The 20 was a logical number. When staff and various people, and not even just in the committee, but in conversation with the group of stakeholders I pulled together to talk about transportation, to talk about all of the factors, there were comments about tutorials during the school day. There were comments about just advisory periods at secondary. There were lots of comments. Even lunch was mentioned. There was a lot of different thoughts on this. And so the feeling was it was a solid number that you could actually do something with. 15, how are you going to break that up? We proposed to you before that if the 20 were approved, we would probably go with 10 and 10 and make it less invasive to the families, not quite as much of a change, except for the high school and trying to work to start them no earlier than 7:30.
Remind us again what the staff thought of this proposal, like the feedback you got from staff.
And the feedback was, I believe there was 712 respondents. Yes, there it is. Now, this is all respondents, and you can see that it's pretty split on positive, negative, although there's a lot of neutral. In those neutrals, a lot of times they make a comment. A comment might be, if you add the minutes, please be sure and split them. Another comment may be, add a day at the end of the year. Things, it's just comments. And so of that, though, when they break it out with the staff was more than 50% in favor of adding minutes versus adding days.
So, one last question. What is, I understand this is your recommendation. What is your feel for what TEA is going to do with waivers the following year? Because you've had personal conversation. I know that that's a difficult question. Difficult question.
My concern is the statement. We believe the intent of House Bill 2610 was to relieve the need for waiver days. That's a powerful statement to put in an FAQ, but that's, as far as I can quote. I think there's hesitancy, and there has been, to give us more direct guidance also because of the change of the commissioner. And that was also stated to me in a verbal conversation with a TEA representative.
So I'll just say my feeling on this is, having the sort of new information that we are going to get the waivers next year, I wish some of the community members would have come and spoken this evening. I know that there were some that said they were, and they didn't. I really wish they would have, because I think that may have been helpful to the board. But my general view is that we're going to have to do this at some point. I don't know what our new commissioner is going to have to say about waivers, but if we're going to have to do it at some point, I feel like you guys on the committee did a lot of good work. I agree that it's compelling when you look at surrounding districts and see that we were already on the low side in minutes and already on the low side in days, that I'm inclined to support the recommendation and do it sooner rather than later and allow us to get adjusted before TEA says no more waivers. So that's my thought on it.
And if I could also clarify that chart you just had up with the results, the survey results, and we discussed this in the committee and maybe even last week, I don't remember, but of those negative, a lot of the comments were, take away county fair day, or
That was most common.
which was not a solution. It was negative, but it was not a solution because it wouldn't have made a difference. You can't just add one day. So, yeah, it was negative, but can't do that.
I have a quick question. I just wanted for clarification. Go back to your results page, please. We had 712 participants, and we sent out how many surveys, and within what time frame did we send out those surveys?
I believe, and Nancy, you can help me, December, I was prior to the break, December 16th maybe? Approximately, that Wednesday, I believe, whatever that is. I don't know that 16th, I believe that sounded right, all the way through January 8th.
And this was sent out to the whole Fort Bend ISD populace, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And on the website, advertised on the website, and also advertised through Dr. Dupree's personal messages, where he would refer to it and discuss some of the key points, and then encourage them to participate and give feedback. And then again, at the beginning of the first of the year, a second message went out encouraging them to give feedback. But I do want to say, I think change is hard, no matter what. But if the board feels as though they would rather, not go to the full 20 minutes at the beginning, I feel like the committee would understand that. Do we think, though, that it's in line with what's instructionally sound and what's a best practice in our community, in our greater community? Yes, it's in line. And it's not an unreasonable expectation.
Did you show us the feedback from staff? I don't remember if you did.
No,
or
I
not.
did not. I received that from
Much more.
community. I did not show you a graph on that,
Okay.
but I believe it was 50% of the staff were positive, with several of them having neutral.
Right.
So, is that about right, ladies? I think I remember seeing it. I just didn't make a slide on it.
So, can I ask a question, Dr. Whitbeck? Did I do the math correctly that if we do 435 minutes a day and 176 days, that gives us enough minutes to meet the state law, plus 2 bad weather days? Is that?
Yes, if you reduce by 5 minutes, you would be able to still do the 2 bad weather makeup days and comply, because waivers will be granted, yes.
But, okay, so let's say we did that, and then next year or the following year, there aren't any waivers. So then what happens?
Well, then we would reconvene a committee and bring you back a proposal as to how we feel is best to handle it.
Right, but then do we, the waiver is for the 4 days, 3 days?
This year, we're only recommending 3 professional development days. And the state allows 420 for each one, so that's 1260 minutes that you kind of get back if you apply for the waiver and you receive the waiver. So-
But we meet this with, we would meet this, I guess what I misunderstand, or not quite understanding is, when I do the math, I get a number that's greater than the minutes required by the law, whether or not we have waivers. If I take 176 times 440 or 435,
Oh, for 435
right,
instead
so
of
just
440?
in the blue box, in the light blue box there, we're over the limit already,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And if we used 435, we're over the limit.
Then we would still be, we would still be, yes. Just not as much.
By a couple hundred, okay.
By a couple
But-
hundred,
But it still is factoring in 2 bad weather days, so that's 2
Yes.
2 days.
And without
And actually,
waivers.
there's a mistake in the math, it looks like, although maybe it's fixed. Oh, no, you only allowed 420 for bad weather days?
It's all you're allowed to do. It's very strange. They have rules that I wouldn't begin to tell you all the details of this journey, but it doesn't matter how many minutes if you could have 450 minutes, but you're only allowed to count 420 for a waiver. The same with early dismissal, 210, and that's it. You
But a
can't.
waiver, that's not a waiver, because if you miss school for bad weather, you're going to miss that number of minutes.
The waiver, yeah, right.
But you can only count it at up to 420, no matter how many you have on your calendar. That's their rule.
So that's what you're getting at, is the decision is whether you go 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we're fine in that upper blue box.
Yes.
Even without waivers.
Yes.
What's our magic
That's what
number?
I'm trying to say.
Right.
So if there's no
75.6.
waivers next year,
Right.
we're fine.
You can change it to 15, or you can keep the recommendation
Keep it
at
at
20.
Keep it
That's-
at 20,
that's basically
change to
the decision.
15, we're still fine.
Right.
And it's, the number of waivers gives us even more extra for this year, but it's not really relevant to our long-term plan. Got it. Okay.
So
Well-
whatever y'all want to do. All right. Yeah. said
I actually
200,
got,
yeah.
I got 90, but I think I gave us,
Well,
I don't
half
know.
of
Anyway, whatever.
760 is whatever, 870 or 880 or 885, whatever.
okay.
You'd be 120 minutes over with the, allowing for the bad weather. You'd have your 2 bad weather makeup days, you'd be 120 minutes just extra, if you did 15.
Right, and that's, we obviously can't shave that off. 30 seconds, you can go home 30 seconds earlier every day. No, only 20 seconds. Okay, so I think I understand it. I think I get what our options are. And can you explain again the reasoning, what was the reason behind the committee saying 20 versus 15? There was like a round number?
Yes, I pulled my minutes and reread them, and to review what the committee said, and it was basically that it was, they looked at 5 more minutes, they looked at 5 more minutes instead of the 15. We could extend 5 more minutes, maybe lunch, maybe passing periods, and then overall, after just discussion, the group advises adding 5 more minutes, which was a total of 20. So we went back and forth with a lot of different options and talked it through.
You know, I think.
At
you-
first, it was 435, oddly. It actually was the first thing we looked at.
I think you can actually, and it doesn't matter to me either way, but I think 20 minutes, you could actually, if you got to be there, you can do something with 20 minutes. You know, maybe extend lunch 5 minutes, and then you got 15 more minutes to add passing time or a little another advisory period or, you know, additional, or a little, study period. So,
There's
I
multiple
mean, if you're gonna-
lunches
if you're gonna-
anyway, so
yeah,
you'd
if
have
you're
to
gonna stay
multiply.
there 15 minutes, you know, if you can make it more workable at 20, then I think that was the rationale. So,
Okay. Well, that's fine, and I can see that, I just wanted to
Yeah.
fully grasp it.
well, that's why I
so.
wanted to discuss it again, so.
Okay. Well,
And I
thank-
think our staff can make whichever way the board prefers doable, without a doubt. We can make that. If you wish to reduce it by 5 minutes, we can make that work. But all the things that have been said are all the reasons that there were a lot of different discussion.
Does anybody have any more questions or comments?
I've got a comment. I guess I'll be the first one to say I like the 20 minutes. If we add 5 minutes to lunch or however we go about it, I'll take Dr. Whitbeck's professional recommendation that that's the best thing for our community. And I've mulled over this. I try to do the math. I just get more confused. And so
We're up here trying to.
I respect the process and I respect the committee. And if it's the right thing for our community, then I think 20 minutes is what it needs to be. And quite frankly, after going to China and seeing that they go to school from 6 to 9, I think we could probably use a little extra instructional time. So,
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Now we're on to item 11H3. I would entertain a motion on this item.
Madam President, I move to approve item 11H3 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Tossan and a second by Mr. Rice. This is the affiliation agreement between Fort Bend ISD and ACT Houston. Do we have discussion?
Just for
Mr. Rosenthal?
clarification, the only reason I pulled that is because I may have a conflict of interest, so I want to abstain, so I want to be able to abstain.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. Do we have any other questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. I believe that completes our consent agenda items, and now we're on to our action agenda. We have consideration of a purchase exceeding $50,000 with Learning Forward Professional Services. I'd like to entertain a motion on that.
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tossan. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. We're on to item 12B, revision of board policies.
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12B 1, 2, and 3 as presented.
A motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. Tossan. Do we have discussion? I have a question. Oh, sorry. Too many papers. On the EB local, which is the school calendar, could Mrs. Martinez or Mrs. Rincon, could you give an example of a situation where this would be used? This is the option where the superintendent makes the decision, but informs the board prior to the decision.
Yes, ma'am. An example might be after, similar to last year, after Memorial Day or around Memorial Day with flooding and school had to be canceled, and there might not be a board meeting in time for the board to make the decision about when that makeup instructional day should occur. Then the superintendent would be able to make that decision in order to make up the instructional day for the students after we've already had our bad weather days and we're on that last week of school, as an example.
Okay, so if we were in this case, if we were out of minutes and we needed to have some adjustment made, then he would be able to make that, or the superintendent.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I think I understand that. And I appreciated the different revisions that your team made. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rincon, as well, for those. It clarified a few things and changed just a couple of words, and that helped clarify the language very well, so thank you for that. Do you have any more discussion or questions about these policies? No? All right, hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Next, we delayed, since we're talking about policies, we delayed our policy review. Dr. Dupree, we have the policy review update, and then we have information on the development at Sienna campus. So I'm turning the meeting over to you for those information items.
Yes, Beth is going to, as you're familiar with now, she's going to do a very brief presentation to go over what's in your binder and then set you off to do your homework in advance of the next the February meeting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dupree. Very brief, as he stated, so just a very quick review for the audience watching at home that we are aligning our policy throughout this review with the board's core beliefs and commitments. We're ensuring that all of our local policy is up to date and accurate, and there's a multi-step review process that we've been following. We are presenting to you this evening 7 policies that we will bring to you again at the board workshop in February for input and discussion, and propose for action at the February 15th board meeting. And those are 7 in our E-series policy, or our E-policy series. I mentioned in the very beginning in December that there might be times when we need to bring a policy that's in another policy series for a particular reason. And we will be bringing to you in February 2 policies. One is policy CV local, which is which covers our construction and the change, lost my words here, contingency change orders in construction, and it's in response to an audit recommendation. So it's timely that come to you so that we can review that policy and hopefully take action on policy CV local. So be looking for that for us in February. Another policy is FDA local, which is our inter-district transfer process, which is timely in the way that we're communicating out to our stakeholders with regard to that process moving forward. So we want to make sure we get the policy reviewed and possibly action taken on that moving forward. So this evening you received a new binder, and you notice it's not quite as long as the last binder. That's because it contains only the 7 policies that we're bringing to you for your homework between now and the next board workshop. And so briefly, let's go through the 4 policies that are being recommended for deletion, and those can be found under tab A. And the first sheet under tab A has the explanatory notes, which explains what I'm going to just briefly go over for each policy for you right now. Policy ED local is organization of instruction, and we're recommending deletion of this policy because it references middle school teaming, which is outdated. However, we're bringing you 2 options. One option is to completely delete that policy, the local policy. The second option that you have there is a revision of sorts to include our current practice. So you see both of those on that same page. We are then recommending EFF local, which is instructional resources. And this is an outdated policy that refers to instructional television. And our ability to contract with services is referenced under CH, both local and legal. So we feel that this is an outdated policy in need of deletion. EIAB local covers the grading progress report to parents and makeup work. And this is in our administrative regulations or in our district grading guidelines, which gives us the opportunity to review and revise these as necessary to ensure that they align with our core beliefs and commitments. EKB local is the testing programs. State assessment is covered in this one, and it's really redundant to the legal policy because board policy EKB legal is provided for your reference and speaks to state assessment. One of the policies, before moving forward, one of the policies that is listed on your agenda item there for consideration to be deleted was EL local. And I just want to bring your attention to that because we're not recommending that the policy be deleted. After further review, what we need to delete or move to administrative regulations is the current exhibit, as that is an administrative regulation and not actually a part of the local policy. So we'll be providing specificity within our administrative regulations, but recommending that policy EL local remains the same, so it's not included in your binder. We're not recommending a change. Then our 3 policies that we're recommending for revision begin under tab B. The first one is EHDA local, which is Alternative Methods for Earning Credit Summer School. We've added notes to this policy in the summary portion, and then we've deleted the certain provisions. We've deleted the provision. The reasons that we're deleting the provisions are that the provision regarding permitting a person who is eligible to attend school in the district but who is not enrolled in the district to enroll in district summer school on the same basis that a district student is already provided for you in board policy FD legal. We've also provided that for your reference. The information regarding the tuition waiver is addressed in the summary paragraph, so we're removing that as it's covered in the summary that we've added. And then the district currently provides free classes for students such as those enrolled in the district bilingual and ESL programs. The reduced tuition is currently offered to students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and all other relevant provisions will be included in our administrative regulations for summer school and also be provided to parents through the district website. EI local, academic achievement, the recommended revisions are to provide information regarding partial credit when a student earns a passing grade in one semester of a 2-semester course. And then EIA local, academic achievement grading progress reports to parents. This is the policy where we are revising it to address academic dishonesty, and we've added additional information regarding our district's code of honor. This will also be included in the student handbook beginning in 2016-17. You have been reviewing, and so has staff, several policies for further consideration. So as I ask if you have questions, I'm asking for questions on these 7 policies and feedback on these 7 policies as we prepare to move forward and do the homework and provide us certainly questions through email or phone calls, whatnot. But also, do you have any questions on any of the policies that we've listed for further consideration? And if not now, I just encourage you to continue to look at those and provide us with questions or feedback that you might have.
I think we're in good shape on that. I have a question though. The 2 policies that you mentioned, CV local and FDA local, those you'll give to us at our next meeting as part of the regular agenda, or what's the plan on that?
Well, the plan is it'll be discussed at the workshop for the first time.
Right.
But we'll attempt to get them to you in a board update.
Okay.
In advance, at least a week before that workshop, so you'll have time to review them before we discuss them the first time.
Okay, great. That sounds great. Thank you. All right. Okay, do we have any other questions? Thank you for your hard work in putting all of this together, and we will
Certainly a
read
team effort.
our binders. Dr. Dupree, next item.
Well, we got the information item pertaining to the development of Sienna campus. We have Mickey Morris here to share a few thoughts with the board in that regard.
Check that your microphone is on.
That better?
Yes.
Here we go.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We are in the final stages of design and planning for middle school 15 and elementary school 48. The current sites for both of those campuses are in a portion of the Sienna Plantation development known as Sienna South. And concerns have been raised about the current traffic congestion in all of Sienna, given the limited number of points of ingress and egress for the Sienna development, none of which are at the south. More importantly, there are concerns about the increase in traffic congestion that will come with the developers proceeding with building out Sienna South. And so prior to commencement of the bidding and construction phase for both middle schools 15 and elementary 48, the administration, with the assistance of myself, the land consultants, we would like to look into the matter further. for the board and to gather information as to the plans and options to try to address the congestion concerns and how those congestion concerns could impact the operation of the school. And in doing so, we want to engage in discussions with the various stakeholders, the developer, the county, the MUD, city, and bring information back to the board so we can look at not only what the plans are of those authorities, but the options and more importantly, the timelines.
Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Do we have any comments from anybody? Mr. Rice, did you know? Well, I'd just like to say that I think that that's a good idea because if we're going to be building these schools and we want to have a safe environment for our students and be certain that they're safe in case of emergency. And obviously, parents need to be able to get to and from school and bless you, in a timely way. So we'd be interested, I think, in knowing more about the situation, and thank you for being willing to go and look into it for us.
I will. Okay.
And I think the board's all in agreement on that. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Future board meetings, agenda items.
Okay, well, just take it away, Dr. Dupree. Future
Well,
board meeting agenda
Yeah,
items.
we provide this in advance, so I know you've reviewed it, so I won't belabor it. But the main thing I want to point out is that in February, there's an extensive list of items, in particular reports. I've worked with the president to begin dividing up these items, and I think we've also agreed to add a meeting on February 29th to spread some of these items over the 3 meetings. The intent for that 3rd meeting at this point, in my proposal, is that we do the demographic update, the enrollment review, and the budget discussion on February 29th. So because that all aligns well together, it kind of builds in sequence. So it would be our enrollment projections as well, how we want to use our buildings and how we want to staff. And that'd be a good discussion. We're also planning to do the superintendent's quarterly formative review as part of the evenings on that week. The rest of these items, I'll send you an update of how we're going to divide them up, but you can kind of see it's a number of items of significance and importance to the board. March is primarily budget related to staffing and just kind of continuing the budget discussion. The architectural design contract for the proposed CTE center is also expected to come forth in March, along with, say, a technology item. And we've got policy CV local referenced here, but that'll actually go back to February, according to what Beth has discussed with you this evening. Then when we get to April, well, February is also a big month for the technology plan. And so we're doing those public meetings next week, and then we'll be bringing some plans to the board and hopefully get that approved in February. If not, that would be in March. So really, those are the main things. I mean, there's a lot on here going forward. I'd be happy to respond to any questions or gather any feedback you might have.
I think we've read the list, and so there's a lot to do, and it's 11:15 at night, so I think we need to stop for the evening. But thank you for keeping up with the list and keeping up with all of these reports and items so that we can be informed and make good decisions for our school district. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.